Quiet, silent sobs, with his head in his raised hands, tears dripping down onto the table, and his shoulders shaking pitifully. Kelsey had thought it was no wonder Elizabeth didn't want strong drink in her house. But it wasn't the drink that was causing Elliot such distress, as she was to discover. No, he'd been sitting there with his back to the door, assuming he wouldn't be disturbed while he contemplated killing himself. Kelsey had wondered several times since if he would have had the courage to actually go through with it if she had quietly left. He'd never struck her as being an overly brave man, just a gregarious, usually jovial one. And it was her presence, after all, that had presented him with a solution to his troubles, one that he might not have considered otherwise, one that she certainly would never have thought of. And all she'd done was ask him, "Uncle Elliot, what's wrong?" He'd swung around to see her standing behind him in her high-necked nightgown and robe, carrying the lamp she always brought downstairs with her. For a moment he'd appeared shocked, but then his head had dropped back into his hands, and he'd mumbled something she couldn't quite make out, so she'd had to ask him to repeat himself. He'd raised his head enough to say, "Go away, Kelsey. You shouldn't see me like this." "It's all right, really," she'd told him gently. "But perhaps I should fetch Aunt Elizabeth?" "No!" had come out with enough force to make her start. Then, more calmly, if still quite agitated, he added, "She doesn't approve of my drinking, and she doesn't know." "Doesn't know that you drink?" He didn't answer immediately, but she had already assumed that was what he meant. The family had always known that he would go to extremes to keep Elizabeth from unpleasantness, apparently even those of his own making. Elliot was a large man with blunt features and hair that had gone mostly grey now that he was approaching 50. He'd never been very handsome, even when he was younger, but Elizabeth, the prettier of the two sisters, and still beautiful today at 42, had married him anyway. As far as Kelsey knew, she loved him still. They'd never had any children of their own in the 24 years of their marriage, and that was possibly why Elizabeth loved her nieces so dearly. Mamma had mentioned once to Father that it was through no fault of their not trying, that it simply was not meant to be. Of course, Kelsey shouldn't have heard that. Mamma hadn't realized that she had been within earshot at the time, and Kelsey had overheard other things over the years, of how confounded Mamma was as to why Elizabeth had married Elliot, who was frankly homely and had had no money to speak of, when she'd had so many other handsome, wealthy suitors to choose from instead. And besides, Elliot was in trade. But that was Elizabeth's business, and the fact that she'd always been a champion of the less fortunate might have had a great deal to do with her choice. Or not. Mamma had also been known to say that there was no accounting for love and its strange workings, that it wasn't, nor ever would be, governed by logic, or even one's own will. "Doesn't know that we're ruined." Kelsey blinked. So much time had passed since she had asked her question, and that wasn't the answer she had anticipated. In fact, she could barely give it credit. His drinking could hardly be cause for social ruin when so many gentlemen, and ladies for that matter, drank to excess at the many gatherings they frequented. So she decided to humor him. "So you've created a bit of a scandal, have you?" Kelsey had chided. "A scandal?" He'd seemed confused then. "Oh, yes, it will be. Indeed it will. And Elizabeth will never forgive me when they take this house away." Kelsey had gasped, but once again she'd drawn the wrong conclusion. "You've gambled it away?" "Now, why would I do a fool thing like that? Think I want to end up like your father? Or perhaps I should have. At least then there would have been a slim chance for salvation, when now there is none." She'd been utterly confused herself by that point, not to mention thoroughly embarrassed. Her father's past sins, with the accompanying reminder of what those sins had wrought, shamed her. So, with high colour in her cheeks that he probably